this lecture yesterday, and then you guys are having it today. So today we're going to be talking about elaborating more on this idea of evolutionary mechanics. When you think of the word mechanic or mechanical or machine, what are some words that pop in your head? What do machines do? Something we know that they do. Set the motion. Yeah, like they move, right? Like stuff is happening. There's an action. There's kinetic energy. Generally speaking, when a machine performs an action, what could be the two results of that? Of the event of the machine moving, what could be two effects, possible effects? You're thinking too deep into yesterday's lesson, which is good. Anyone live by forest hills like me? What have we seen machines doing over the past few months? Destroying. Machines have been taking things down, right? They've been taking down the bridge. And what will happen after that? Machines will build the bridge back up. Right? So when we think about mechanics or mechanical or a machine, it's something that moves in order to manipulate the environment. You can think of your hands as machines, right? They transform the environment around them. They build things, they take things apart, right? You rip things open, right? That's a mechanical action. You construct things, you might write or build something, right? That's the example of a machine in use. And we can start to think about our timeline activity from the other day in reference to our star question. So, bacteria are very useful in the study of evolution, but why is that? So thinking about when did they appear on our timeline, the one we did together on the board? Have they been around for a long time or a short period of time? All right, so for one thing, they were the first things to evolve, right? And as part of our MCAS exit card yesterday, do we have diverse, complex organisms appear, or was it simple, small ones appear first? Right, so our bacteria were simple, small organisms. And if something is really small, like it's only got two parts to it, is it easier or harder to change that thing? What do we think? Like if you've got only two parts to something, it's really easy to change it, right? You just have to manipulate one half or the other, right? So bacteria can transform very quickly, very easily. And why is that? What is something they can do way quicker than us? It takes us like 13, maybe even 16 years to be able to do this for our species. But they can do it within hours of their being born. When you guys reach puberty, it's a symbol that your body can do what? Well, you are growing. That you can reproduce, right? One of the major reasons they're good is bacteria reproduce quickly. Now, on Monday, we talked about hominid evolution, how it's taken like millions of years to get from the state Lucy was in to the state we are now. And again, part of that is it takes us a long time to get old enough to reproduce, and then our kids have to grow old enough to reproduce. Remember I used that example of the webbed hands, right? Let's say, the protagonist of that movie, Waterworld, what was it, the story we made up that we expected to happen at the conclusion of that movie? Between him and the female lead. Right. They're going to make some babies, and those babies will have webbed feet, right? And then how long will it take for those babies to produce babies of their own? Well, there's still plenty of people on the planet. We're just talking about how long would it take them to be old enough to reproduce. Maybe if they reproduce a little slowly, but for us, we talked about adolescence, puberty occurring at what age? Last chapter?
13.
Yeah, 12, 13, right? Whereas bacteria, because they can reproduce within hours, they can pass on their adaptation quickly. So they can also transform / mutate quickly. Yeah, Nathan, bring it on.
Like, you know how you said they can start reproducing? Like, you know how reproduction is like how it has to be two fields and one base of dominant?
Mm-hmm.
Base of dominant recessive, let's just say. And all that,
Then the kids wouldn't get it. Right, so that's the thing. Sometimes health mutations do pop up in organisms all the time, but if they are recessive, they won't appear in the next generation. But we're going to talk all about that in chapter 11, many moons from now. All right, so I'm going to grab my cup of choice, and Nathan, get us started off today. If you could try to choose someone to read our quote of the day, please. Yeah, thank you. All right, so if you could kindly read our quote, please. Exception, yeah. Great job. All right, so extinction is the rule, survival is the exception. So what are we saying for most of the species who began on Earth at this point? Have most species survived or not?
Anybody?
I know she's very beautiful, but we don't all have to stare at her. Oh, so if we're saying extinction is the rule and survival is the exception, for most species that have occurred on Earth in its 4.6 billion years, have more species survived or gone extinct?
Got extinct.
Have gone extinct. As a matter of fact, 99% of all the species that have ever existed have gone extinct. So it's generally speaking most probable that the species won't last forever, right? Something will end that species at some point. What do you think might be some things that could end a species?
Predators.
Predators, they might get all eaten up, sure.
Geological.
A geological phenomenon like a hurricane or earthquake, we'll do Alvin and Tiffany. A disease could wipe them out, right? You're going to do that one too, right? That's a really good segue into Monday's lecture, so we'll put that in our back pocket for now. All right, now for our homework, you'll notice there are 2 moons today. Anyone want to guess why that is? Something special that's just started? That some people elected? Honors, right? So everybody is doing the defining of the bold terms, page 102 to 105. 5 terms there. My honors folks, you're also going to look up an additional word not in our textbook. It's an AP bio word, so we're going to the honors level with this. And you're going to look up that word and find 2 examples of it. So that word is exaptation, and it's a spin-off of what we've been doing this week. So honors folks, that's your extra little piece for the week. One of the 2 things you guys do. All right, and it looks like most folks are done with the agenda, so it is time to move on, so people don't start getting fancy. All right, so over on the right, we'll start off with evidence of evolution as our heading. So we're on to the right side of our thinking format. And as always, we'll talk about the words within the sentences as well in order to best upgrade our ELA skills and be successful at standardized assessments. Do you remember where they are? And so if you go over to my desk, to the right of my chair, 2nd drawer down. All right, anytime you see the prefix co, co-worker, collaborate, cooperation, what are we talking about there?
Like assistant.
Okay, like an assistant, like someone's with you, right? As a matter of fact, if you think about Latin root words like the word cone, for example, anybody Spanish speakers cone?
Yes.
With, right? So whenever we talk about like a collaborative or cooperation, we're talking about with someone else or with someone else's, right? Groups of people can collaborate with each other on a project, right? You can cooperate with someone on completing something. When we talk about coevolution, we're talking about this idea that some organisms are evolving together, side by side in a dance. Rather than evolution only happening for the individual species, 2 or more are involved in this evolution together and adapt, again, of course, based on the environment that we talked about on Monday, but also it might be that these organisms are evolving in a competition, right? One is trying to outdo the other, or a cooperation. They're trying to accomplish a common goal. So let's talk about some examples of each of these. Let's say I am an adorable, frisky, fluffy little bunny, right? Where am I in like the whole food chain scheme of things? Am I an eater or am I eaten? Right? Stuff hunts me, right? which means if I don't want to get eaten, I've got to be
Fast.
fast, right? I've got to be able to escape. But the animals that depend on me for food, they want to be able to eat, so they also have to be fast. So what happens to all the slow individuals that are either slow hawks or slow rabbits?
You get that.
They die, right? Either the hawks starve because they can't catch the rabbits, or the rabbits always get caught, right? So in this sense, competition drives each species to get faster, to get better. Only the fastest bunnies, only the fastest hawks. Now cooperation has a bit of a different spin to it. Each organism wants something from the other one, so they develop structures over time, of course, not just like spontaneously. It's not like just had a conversation, they're like, hey, if you do this, I'll do that. Right, we're talking about mutations and over time. For example, we have here, I'm Shinatoning, a butterfly. And butterflies have a long feeding tube known as a proboscis. Why do they have this structure, this proboscis?
So you can feed on flowers.
Right, great, so they can feed on the nectar in the flower. Does anyone remember the chemical equation for sugar? We had it way back in the first week. If I put this, can anybody complete it? All right, H double of 6,
12.
and then
6.
there we go, right? So the butterfly wants the delectable, nutritious sugar. What does the flower need from the butterfly? And folks may have covered this back in their 5th grade class if they were BPS students all the way through. You can even think about all of these flying creatures, our arthropod butterfly, our hummingbird, and our mammalian bat. They're all animals that depend on flowers for food, and what do they do in service for the flower?
Like they travel pollen.
They carry its pollen, right? So as this butterfly is digging deep into the nectar pot, right, granules of pollen, plant sperm, get all over the butterfly. And has anyone ever seen a butterfly up close compared to a lot of other insects? Are they completely smooth like other insects, or do they have a little bit of a fuzz, a little bit of a texture to them? Their bodies might be a little bit smooth, but their wings have a little bit of texture, right? And that captures up that pollen really well, and then the flower gets its sperm carried to another flower and they reproduce. They do, yeah, within that. Absolutely. All right, great. So we've got this image here of cooperation, right? The flower's going to provide food, and the bat's going to provide the service of carrying pollen to the next flower. And the parts of these animals match the plant that they cooperate with, right? The bat would not be able to get nectar from this kind of flower. His head and his tongue are too big, they're too wide. All right, so let's move on to another type of evolution. Convergent evolution. And folks who are math savvy know the word convergent. What is it when two lines converge? It's when they intersect. Excellent. Right, so we can go ahead and throw that up here. So this is when there's somewhat of an intersection in their evolutionary cycles. In this particular type of evolution, this is a process where the organisms are not related at all. They have nothing to do with one another in terms of their ancestral line, right? In this example, we've got birds, mammals, and reptiles, meaning that they're not monophyletic. So let's go ahead and dissect this word. The prefix mono? One, excellent. And then phyletic refers to, we'll say, a branch. We're just going to put that in like most common vernacular. We'll keep it in layman's terms. So we're saying they're not from the same branch of life. They're not from the same ancestral line. They've independently evolved from each other, but they have similar body shapes because they lead a similar lifestyle in a similar environment. All right, so in a moment, our pencil cup holder is going to pull the stick, and that person's going to tell us at least 2 similarities between all 3 organisms. And of course, if you're one of those folks that finishes really early, feel free to copy down any or all parts of the picture as well. You never know, next Friday, what might happen. Indeed. All right, so, it's time. very general, but what are two things you know to be in common with all three of those organisms? Something you notice that they all have the same of. All right, they all have this structure called a wing, right? Terrific. Right, so we can say they all have wings. That's something they all have in common. What about the proportion of the wings to the rest of their body? What would you say?
That they're bigger than.
Great, right. So we can even say that wings, that are a large part of their body. And what about the overall mass of the animal? Do these look like big, heavy, elephant-like animals? No, why would they have such small bodies? How does that assist them in flight? If we got air below us, right, molecules of air kind of create a little bit of buoyancy, would a light body have an easier time staying adrift in a wind? Yeah, right, we're just using common physics thoughts here. Great. So now let's look at the differences. What are some things that are different about these things?
Hi, Mr. Capillardi.
Yes, Ms.
Hi,
Fidenzi?
you said gyro, Hyro, Lasso, was the main option?
Yeah, Hyro will be right down.
Hyro, Lasso.
Yep. Oh, big trouble. All right, so now what's different about all three things? And I'll even, so we posted the picture better, I'll shut the lights off. I'll try to shut the lights off. And we can even start by just saying, what's different between the bird and the other two? So I'm looking at all three animal points here. Yeah, Nathan. All right, so the bird has these, fluffy feathers, whereas on the bat and the pterodactyl, their wings are mostly made of what? Skin. So it's mostly skin, right? All right, now we're saying that these two seem more similar than that, but, and this might only be for the folks up in the front who can see the best. How are the bat wings very different than the pterodactyl wings?
They're like their fingers, they cover the end of the wing.
Excellent, right? So the bat wing has bones all the way throughout, all the fingers are visible, where that's not the case for the pterodactyl. The main thing to notice here, though, is they're all flying creatures. They all have similar shapes and body plans, yet they each have different relatives, right? Birds, mammals versus reptiles. It's just because they're all animals that live in an environment where flying is either necessary or helpful for their survival. All right, 3 more words. We'll finish off our notes for the day. Ready to go. All right, great. So the next thing we'll talk about are homologous structures. I'll turn the lights back on. And this prefix, homo or homeo, pops up a lot throughout the year on several different units. So does anyone know what that prefix indicates? That things are the same. Excellent. And when we're saying homologous, we're kind of saying, we're going to kind of use a synonym here called stem, like it's the stem of something. We're saying the same stem, right? So these anatomical structures have the same stem, the same kind of shape, or at least they arise from the same kind of genes, which we'll talk way more about later on. And these structures are similar amongst different species, but are modified depending on their specific lifestyles. So we just saw good examples of homologous anatomy on the last slide, where you had your bird wing, you had your bat wing, and you had your pterodactyl wing. They were similar. They had some commonalities, but they had some differences in their structure based on their ancestors and based on how they use those things. And we'll talk more about the differences of how birds and bats use their wings later on today. Now, this is one of our super, always on the MCAS words. So I'm going to ask folks to put a star next to it, highlight it, underline it, something to make it pop out of your notes. This one commonly appears in open responses in particular. We'll give you some pictures like we just looked at and ask you to describe how they're homologous. So all today, that'll be the majority of our conversations as well as our lab experiment. Now when we study homologous anatomical structures, we're doing a part of biology known as comparative anatomy. That's pretty easy, right? Comparative just means to compare two or more things. And anatomy, I've used this word a few times, but I haven't defined it other than verbally. Anatomy always just means parts of, right? It's parts of the body. So we're comparing parts of the body, you know, the similarities, the differences between different organisms. We did this on Monday during our conversation a couple different times. We talked about the cat and the dog, right? What were some things they had in common, our cat and our dog? They're quadruped, they both have 2 ears, they're both covered in, but yet we can tell them apart because what things are different? All right, cats have the pointy ears, whereas dogs have the more curved ears. What about their muzzles? How do you tell a cat muzzle from a dog one? Great, so both Nathans are kind of remembering that the cat muzzle from a profile, right, was more square-like, whereas the dog muzzle was more columnar, and that's common for most of the time, right? Obviously there's dogs like pugs that are flat, or cats like Himalayas that are flat, but we're saying for the most part. All right, and they'll generally speaking not ask you this particular word in its definition on the test, but they'll say use your skills of comparative anatomy and analyze this picture kind of a thing. So we just want to make sure that you know it explicitly. All right, and then let's move on to our last vocab word of the day. All right, everybody. And that is vestigial. And vestigial is a tricky one. So commonly throughout the MCAS in the past 10 years, it's come up on about half of those tests, and they've used it differently. They've used it sometimes as a picture problem, sometimes as a word problem, sometimes as evidence of evolution. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about it today, as well as in a succeeding lesson a couple weeks from now, when we wrap up evolution in general. But today we'll just do the introduction. All right, so a vestigial structure in an organism, vestigial anatomy, is an imperfectly developed organ or structure that has like little to no use at all to the organism. And that's uncommon. It's uncommon for an organism to develop and build something on its body it's not going to do anything with. They have it though because they've inherited it from an evolutionary ancestor. On Monday we watched a short video about the inner fish, and could somebody remind me what's one of the vestigial thing they focused on in that episode? They were talking about how the ice skaters were falling on it, and then that woman had discovered one from a missing link primate species. The tailbone, right? The coccyx. That's a great example of a vestigial anatomy, right? It's something we don't use. We don't have a tail. It doesn't protrude, but the bones are still there because our ancestors had that, and then it's still built into our DNA. It's still built into our genes, so we still create that thing. Does anyone know other vestigial organs? A lot of folks get it taken out when.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
Why do we have them if we don't use it?
So just because, so it's like, ancient ancestors, right? Like pre-ape primate ancestors had tails, and all the DNA in our nucleus, we talk about this in chapter 4 a lot more, has all the DNA that's ever been in every organism pretty much. Like from the earliest bacteria up till now, it's just about what switches turn on decides what our body makes. That's why some people are born with little nubby tails or webbed toes, right? Because that gene turned on, right? So it's just simply a matter of genetics. And who knows, like maybe over another few thousand or million years, it proves no use and it'll just go away completely. Yeah.
Or choosing my, everyone has a tail.
Or perhaps, right, like that water world kind of situation, perhaps we end up having a tree-like existence later on. Maybe the earth floods and the only way to survive is to be up high. And those with little tails do well and they reproduce, and before you know it, long tails again, right? Yeah, and again, millions of years. It takes a long time for this stuff to happen. All right, so what we're going to do now is all of the fine, motivated academics are going to walk up to the front of the room and grab the worksheet that's in front of my clock. And then they also need to make sure they have the box of coloring tools, which found their way to the back of the room today. A couple tables still have it. So you need your coloring tool box back there, and then you need this worksheet here. Each individual, of course, needs their own. hopefully at this stage in your existence. And you guys are my section 4, so we can slap that up there. And this is going to be our second lab of the year, so we can put a little 2 right there. Right, so hopefully folks by now have gotten that. We're going to fill out part of this together. Oh, it's the 10th, October 1st. All right, cool. All right, so if you look at our directions, first thing we do is we talk about homologous structures. We already covered that in our notes. And then they want us to carefully examine the 4-limbed skeletons shown on figure 1, which is the next page, and then color the human one first. So I'm going to scroll down here, and I've got my human arm up. And we're all going to do the same thing in the same way at the same time. That way I know everyone has at least the first one right. We're going to grab our red pencil, pen, marker, whatever we prefer. And we're going to underline or box the word humorous in red. And what do you think the next thing we're going to do is? Color that object in, right? So color that humorous bone in. And folks, based on this name humorous, does anyone know what's the more common name for this bone? It's the funny bone. It's humorous. Right, yeah, if you knock the end of it, you set the nerve on it. All right, and of course, the red doesn't have to be like, so it's so saturated there's no white left, right? As long as you've got an outline and some shading, you're fine. All right, and then I'm using our traditional Roy G. Biv convention we've been using. What will be the next color we use, Roy G. Biv? Orange. Let's do our ulna in orange. Ulna. So we're going to do our ulna in orange. Use a marker too. Leave that behind. Oh, that's Snyder. All right. And I can imagine folks can already guess what's coming next. Roy G. Biv? Why? Right, we're going to use our radius in yellow. So we'll do our radius in yellow. And again, just shading that in. All right, now Jacqueline. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I had moved her over there today. That's awesome. And Michelle, you'll appreciate that Michaela sits in your chair, and I called you Michelle this morning, so there you have it. It's like I know your seating places better than your names or something. All right, so we're going to do our carpals in green. Those are the bones of the wrist, the multiple bones of the wrist. Our carpals will be in green, and those are the bones of the wrist. Sometimes you hear those crunching around in there. And what color will come next, folks?
Blue.
Blue, Roy G. Biv, right? So we'll do our metacarpals in blue. Now that's just the first bone. These are the bones that make up the hands. So just those first bones after the metacarpals. And lastly, we have our phalanges. And what color will we do those in? Yeah, we'll do those in our purple, right? Cool. All right, now what's going to happen for the next 8 minutes or so is you guys are going to do the same thing to the other sets, and then we'll flip the paper back over and have a conversation about how these animals use this limb in common or differently, right? Whether it's for walking or swimming or flying or communicating or fighting. Each of them has several uses for this appendage in different combinations. So yeah, let's spend the next 8 minutes or so getting these all colored in with the same system we just created. And then we'll dissect our chicken wing.